You really think a janitor can take on 10 commandos? The words echoed across the polished floors of the Valencia Innovations atrium, bouncing lightly off glass walls and marble tiles, but Wes Dalton didn't flinch. He stood by the edge of the training mat, mop in hand, sleeves rolled up just enough to reveal a glimpse of faded military tattoos that traced across his forearms, the lines of ink telling a story of service, discipline, and quiet strength no one in this room could imagine. The fluorescent lights hummed softly overhead, casting a cool white glow over the polished marble and the rows of employees who had gathered to watch what they expected to be a spectacle, a moment of easy amusement at the expense of a man who had chosen invisibility over recognition. Wes adjusted his grip on the mop, feeling its worn handle familiar and grounding under his hands, the scent of clean water and floor wax rising faintly as he exhaled slowly, letting the quiet power of his presence settle into the room. At 29, he had lived a lifetime in the shadows of discipline, long hours spent training elite units, and missions carried out with precision and integrity, all while raising his daughter alone in a small suburban apartment just 15 minutes from the office where he now quietly swept, his uniform of coveralls a far cry from the medals and commendations stored away in a drawer at home. Across the mat, Lauren Kingsley, the CEO known for her sharp intellect and commanding presence, stood barefoot, her black Brazilian jiu-jitsu belt tied with exacting precision, the confidence in her posture radiating authority as she regarded him with a mixture of amusement and curiosity. The crowd leaned in, whispering, some smirking, some shaking their heads, expecting spectacle, expecting something to poke fun at, yet unable to look away. Wes tilted his head slightly, letting his gray eyes meet hers without challenge, without arrogance, the calm in his gaze a counterpoint to the sharp energy of her movements, the quiet assertion that strength was measured not in force but in discipline, in restraint, in dignity. Each step he took toward the center of the mat was deliberate, measured, the sound of his boots against the polished floor soft but resonant, as if marking a heartbeat that the room hadn't noticed before, a rhythm of patience and readiness. The hum of conversation faded, replaced by a tense silence that thickened with each passing second, punctuated only by the subtle creak of the mat beneath his feet and the faint whir of overhead lights. Lauren's lips curved into a half-smile, a flicker of challenge in her eyes, but the moment she noticed the tattoos peeking from beneath his sleeves, her posture froze, a subtle shift in the room's energy cascading like ripples through the gathered onlookers. The tattoos were intricate, the ink dark against his skin, symbols of experience, honor, and the quiet resilience of someone who had walked through fire and carried the weight of responsibility with unwavering composure. The crowd's whispers dimmed to nothing as recognition began to replace expectation, the smirks fading, the air thick with unspoken respect. Wes Dalton stood still, mop in hand, embodying a presence that demanded acknowledgement not through words or boasting, but through the weight of a life lived with integrity, the stillness of a man who knew that true power did not need an audience, and as he raised his head to meet Lauren's gaze once more, the quiet dignity in his stance spoke volumes louder than any applause could, leaving the room suspended in a moment of collective astonishment and silent admiration. Wes Dalton took a slow breath and lowered the mop to the floor, letting the water drip quietly into the bucket, the scent of cleaning solution mingling with the faint metallic aroma of the building's ventilation system. He glanced toward the bleachers where a small crowd of employees and interns had gathered, their eyes shifting nervously between the two figures in the center. Lauren Kingsley remained poised, her black belt glinting faintly under the ceiling lights, yet for the first time a flicker of uncertainty passed through her steady gaze. The floor beneath them was immaculate, reflecting the overhead glow like a still pond, yet the tension in the room made the reflection seem almost fluid, trembling in anticipation. Wes's hands rested lightly on the mop handle, a simple tool in a man's grasp but heavy with the weight of years spent learning patience, timing, and balance. He remembered mornings long before dawn, the aroma of instant coffee filling his small kitchen as he prepared his daughter's lunch, the quiet hum of the refrigerator accompanying the steady rhythm of his life as he balanced work, parenting, and the lessons of discipline instilled from decades of service. The tattoos along his forearms, only partially revealed by the rolled sleeves of his coveralls, were more than ink, they were reminders of resilience, of missions accomplished, of honor maintained even when no one was watching. Lauren shifted slightly on the mat, her bare feet making no sound, yet her posture carried the precision of a woman accustomed to command, the subtle narrowing of her eyes betraying curiosity despite the outward appearance of control. Around them, whispers of speculation softened into silence as the employees sensed the unspoken tension, a narrative of respect and quiet authority unfolding without a single word spoken. Wes stepped forward with measured care, his movements deliberate, each footfall absorbing the ambient energy of the room, translating it into a calm presence that contrasted with the prior air of derision. The hum of fluorescent lights and the distant murmur of the ventilation system seemed to synchronize with his rhythm, creating a subtle symphony that underscored the gravity of the moment. His gray eyes met hers without challenge, without need for assertion, conveying instead the depth of experience and self-possession that only time and circumstance could instill. Lauren's lips parted slightly, an unspoken acknowledgement of the unexpected weight in his stance, and for the first time the confidence that had been a shield of authority appeared tinged with a quiet respect. The room seemed to contract, all focus converging on the small distance between them, the interplay of calm observation, and the revelation of character etched into every gesture, every breath. The faint buzz of the fluorescent lights became the backdrop to a tableau of discipline and dignity, a quiet lesson unfolding before the eyes of all who had come expecting spectacle but were now witnesses to integrity made manifest. Wes adjusted his shoulders, straightened his posture, and with a slow, intentional inhale, allowed the moment to settle fully, the weight of his presence silent yet profound, and the room held its collective breath, leaning in to absorb the unspoken lesson of patience, respect, and the quiet power of a life lived with unwavering principles. Lauren Kingsley shifted her weight slightly, the subtle movement drawing Wes Dalton's attention for the briefest moment, though his posture remained unwavering, his gray eyes calm yet alert, reflecting a life spent in measured observation. The polished floor beneath their feet caught the glow of the afternoon sun streaming through the atrium's glass panels, scattering thin lines of light across the mat, and the soft hum of the building's ventilation became almost imperceptible as the focus narrowed to the small space between them. Each breath in the room seemed synchronized with the quiet strength radiating from Wes, a rhythm built from years of discipline, early mornings spent running the empty streets of his neighborhood with his daughter's small hand occasionally brushing against his own, evenings at home reviewing old manuals and strategy notes from his military service, and weekends balancing work at the local garage with tutoring sessions for children in the neighborhood who reminded him of simpler, purer motivations. Lauren's expression softened imperceptibly as she studied him, the initial amusement fading into a mixture of curiosity and admiration as she noticed the subtle way he adjusted his stance, the careful placement of his feet and the gentle yet deliberate movement of his shoulders, a choreography that spoke of deep experience without a single word being uttered. Around them, the employees' whispers had all but vanished, replaced by a hushed awareness, each person sensing the gravity of the quiet exchange, the unfolding of a lesson in presence and dignity that required no display, no commentary, no cheering crowd, only observation and reflection. Wes's hands tightened briefly on the mop handle before loosening again, the motion almost imperceptible, a silent punctuation to the narrative of his life etched into every line of his posture, every tilt of his head, every measured shift of weight. The tattoos glimpsed under his sleeve seemed to carry a story that transcended the room, the ink tracing the paths of missions completed, of responsibilities shouldered, of values maintained in solitude, and the realization that true strength often manifests in the spaces between words rather than in their proclamation. Lauren's stance remained poised yet thoughtful, her eyes tracking him carefully as if trying to decipher the balance between humility and capability, the precision of a commander and the quiet restraint of a man who understood the power of observation over performance. The sunbeam angled across the floor, highlighting the contrast between polished marble and the worn mop handle, a subtle metaphor for the juxtaposition of their worlds, her structured authority and his grounded, lived experience. Every detail of the environment, the faint scent of cleaning solution, the slight creak of the floor under minimal weight, the soft buzz of fluorescent lights, contributed to the tension and anticipation, a cinematic tableau of respect slowly unfolding. Wes took another deliberate step forward, his movements fluid yet restrained, and Lauren, despite her confidence and the expectation of control she had carried into the room, felt the shift as the room itself seemed to pause, all attention drawn to the silent power of presence and the embodiment of discipline, patience, and quiet integrity displayed in the simplest of actions. The hum of the fluorescent lights seemed to deepen as Wes Dalton shifted his weight slightly, the mop handle still resting lightly in his hands, a tether to the ordinary world even as his presence transformed the atmosphere around him. Lauren Kingsley's gaze remained fixed, her sharp gray eyes narrowing just enough to betray her intrigue, the lines of her posture softening imperceptibly as she processed the subtle authority emanating from the man before her. Every movement he made was deliberate, economical, each step a quiet testament to years of training and the discipline cultivated long before this room existed, in mornings spent before sunrise, running the empty streets near his daughter's school, the cold wind biting at his cheeks but never at his resolve. The marble beneath their feet reflected glimmers of the afternoon light, each beam slicing through the atrium in slender lines that danced across the polished floor, and yet the focus of the room condensed entirely onto the silent interaction, the hum of ambient noise receding into an almost reverent quiet. Wes adjusted his grip on the mop, the simple tool now symbolic, an extension of patience, balance, and control honed through decades of experience that demanded neither recognition nor applause. Lauren's stance remained upright, a careful study of his form, the rhythm of his breath, the alignment of shoulders and hips conveying a command she could not ignore, a mastery that required no demonstration beyond the quiet assertion of presence. Around them, employees leaned forward subtly, caught in the gravity of anticipation, sensing without explanation that something deeper was unfolding than a simple demonstration of skill. The air felt charged yet composed, a balance of tension and respect as Wes shifted slightly, tilting his head as if acknowledging the weight of observation, the weight of expectation, the silent measure of integrity he carried into every space he entered. His tattoos, glimpsed faintly under rolled sleeves, hinted at stories of service, of missions carried out with precision and honor, of values maintained even in solitude, their significance resonating more profoundly in the subtle attention of those who noticed. Lauren's hands relaxed at her sides for the briefest fraction of a second, a subtle acknowledgement that the initial amusement had given way to careful consideration, a silent dialogue unfolding in the space between them. The polished floor, the soft buzz of the lights, the faint scent of cleaning solution, and the distant hum of the air system became the backdrop to a tableau of composure, discipline, and unspoken respect. Every detail of the environment, the soft echoes of footsteps, the quiet adjustment of a foot against the marble, the reflective sheen of the mat under ambient light, served to heighten the sense of focus, drawing every observer into the rhythm established by Wes's presence. With each deliberate step and controlled movement, he illustrated that true authority did not require loudness or spectacle, that patience and quiet confidence could shift perception and command attention in ways far beyond the obvious, leaving a lasting impression of integrity, balance, and measured grace. Wes Dalton took a slow, deliberate step onto the center of the mat, the mop still held lightly in his hands, and the room seemed to hold its collective breath. The polished marble reflected the afternoon sun in thin lines that moved with the slight tilt of his body, and each subtle adjustment of his posture conveyed years of training, precision, and quiet authority. Lauren Kingsley shifted on her feet, sensing the weight of experience in his every movement, a silent respect beginning to replace the trace of amusement that had lingered in her gaze. The employees and interns lining the perimeter of the atrium watched intently, their chatter evaporating as the energy of the room focused entirely on the calm, controlled presence of the janitor, a man whose outward simplicity masked the depth of his life experience. Wes's forearms, revealed by rolled sleeves, bore tattoos that hinted at missions, commitments, and values preserved through decades of discipline, each line of ink a quiet testament to integrity and honor. The subtle hum of fluorescent lights overhead and the faint scent of floor wax created a serene backdrop, punctuated only by the soft scrape of the mop against the floor as he adjusted his stance. He glanced toward Lauren. Meeting her sharp gray eyes without a word, communicating confidence and self-possession without challenge or arrogance. Her lips curved in a fraction of a smile, the first acknowledgement that the situation was no longer about mockery but about presence, skill, and character. The marble beneath them seemed to take on a new weight, reflecting not just light but the gravity of the exchange unfolding above it, the space between them charged with anticipation and the silent measurement of respect. Wes shifted slightly again, the movement imperceptible yet significant, a reminder that mastery often manifests in control, timing, and awareness rather than force or speed. Lauren's stance softened almost imperceptibly, her body language betraying the realization that the man she had underestimated possessed a quiet authority that demanded attention. Around them, the audience remained motionless, captivated not by spectacle but by the narrative of discipline, patience, and dignity that played out in slow, deliberate gestures. The sound of footsteps, the subtle creak of the mat, the gentle echo of distant voices all receded as focus sharpened on Wes, who embodied a presence that required no validation, no audience, only acknowledgement through observation. Each inhale and exhale seemed to synchronize with the quiet rhythm he projected, a cadence born of years balancing family, work, and the lessons of a disciplined life. Lauren's gaze lingered, appreciating the stillness and the depth of character, understanding that true strength was not measured by display but by restraint, integrity, and the ability to command respect without uttering a word. The light falling across the room highlighted small details, the reflection of his eyes, the subtle shift of a shoulder, the controlled tilt of his head, each a silent declaration of skill, experience, and quiet authority that transformed the atmosphere from one of casual amusement to reverent attention, leaving the space between them charged with the unspoken power of presence and dignity. The soft echo of footsteps and the faint hum of the air conditioning filled the atrium as Wes Dalton shifted his weight once more, his movements precise and controlled, drawing the room into an almost reverent silence. Lauren Kingsley's sharp gaze followed his every motion, her eyes tracing the lines of his posture, the subtle alignment of his shoulders and hips, the careful placement of each foot, and the ease with which he balanced strength with restraint. The polished marble beneath them caught the afternoon sunlight, scattering thin beams across the mat that highlighted the quiet intensity in his stance, and the employees lining the perimeter leaned forward, unconsciously synchronizing their attention with the rhythm Wes projected. He raised his head slowly, scanning the room without haste, each glance purposeful yet gentle, communicating awareness and control without a single word. The tattoos along his forearms, glimpsed beneath rolled sleeves, told a story of dedication, missions completed, and principles maintained, each mark an emblem of integrity silently recognized by those who understood their significance. Lauren's expression softened subtly, her lips pressing together as she absorbed the depth of his presence, the quiet authority that contrasted sharply with her initial expectation of spectacle. The hum of conversation had dissipated entirely, replaced by the low, almost imperceptible sound of controlled breathing and the faint scrape of the mop handle against the floor as Wes adjusted his grip, a motion both ordinary and extraordinary, symbolizing balance and preparedness. Each micro-movement seemed to carry weight, a lesson in patience and awareness, illustrating that mastery does not require force but emerges from discipline, observation, and the deliberate use of presence. The atmosphere thickened with anticipation as Wes stepped forward again, slow and measured, his body language conveying confidence rooted in experience, the calm in his gray eyes reflecting a life built on responsibility, quiet courage, and care for those he loved. Lauren remained poised, yet the sharpness in her gaze had transformed into attentive curiosity, a subtle acknowledgement that she was witnessing not a performance but a demonstration of integrity, resilience, and self-possession. The light from the atrium windows played across the room, casting soft reflections on the marble and illuminating the subtle shifts in expression on both their faces, capturing a moment of silent understanding that needed no dialogue to convey significance. Around them, the observers felt the change as well, their collective awareness heightened by the quiet intensity, the room holding onto every movement, every breath, every detail as the narrative of dignity, skill, and understated authority unfolded. Wes adjusted his stance once more, shoulders relaxed yet firm, head held high, mop in hand, embodying a quiet power that radiated respect, patience, and self-control, leaving the entire space suspended in a moment of reflective admiration where the true measure of character was seen not in noise, but in the steadfast, silent expression of disciplined presence. The room seemed to stretch and contract around Wes Dalton as he held his stance, every subtle movement creating an almost imperceptible rhythm that pulled the attention of everyone present. Lauren Kingsley's expression had shifted entirely. The initial smirk of superiority had softened into focused observation, her eyes tracing the quiet confidence in his posture, the deliberate alignment of shoulders, the relaxed yet purposeful placement of his feet. The sunlight streaming through the atrium windows highlighted the gentle rise and fall of his chest as he breathed, the quiet steadiness in his eyes reflecting a lifetime of responsibility, training, and measured judgment. Around them, the audience remained motionless, sensing the gravity of the moment without fully understanding it, each person aware that they were witnessing more than a simple demonstration, that the stillness and control Wes exuded conveyed a story of discipline and dignity far beyond appearances. The mop handle in his hands became an extension of his presence, its worn wood grounding him in the present while signaling restraint and mastery, the simple act of holding it lightly communicating both humility and authority. Lauren shifted slightly on the mat, her bare feet silent against the polished surface, and yet the subtle tilt of her head and the soft narrowing of her eyes revealed a recognition that the man before her carried a depth of experience and self-possession that she had not anticipated. The faint hum of the building's ventilation, the soft echoes of distant footsteps, and the reflective glint of marble beneath them created a serene but tense atmosphere, one where the quiet exchange of presence spoke louder than words or applause ever could. Each detail, the subtle flex of a wrist, the minimal but intentional shift of weight, the calm and steady gaze, demonstrated a mastery of self that inspired respect without spectacle. Wes Dalton's gray eyes met Lauren's once again, unflinching, conveying acknowledgement without challenge, a silent invitation to understand that true strength and leadership were measured in composure, in quiet observation, and in integrity maintained regardless of audience or expectation. The sunlight glimmered on his tattoos, partially visible beneath rolled sleeves, intricate symbols of service and honor that spoke of a life lived with purpose and courage, and the room felt the weight of that history subtly, the air thick with the realization that character often outshines presentation, that quiet control can command attention more effectively than overt display. Lauren's lips pressed together. A faint exhale signaling the acknowledgement of a lesson unfolding before her, a silent understanding that the man she had underestimated possessed a power rooted not in noise or showmanship, but in discipline, patience, and an unwavering presence that transformed the energy of the room, leaving every observer, including herself, attuned to the unspoken narrative of integrity, quiet authority, and steadfast dignity. The tension in the atrium shifted subtly as Wes Dalton moved with deliberate calm, the mop handle still lightly gripped in his hands, a grounding presence amid the quiet energy that now enveloped the room. Lauren Kingsley's eyes remained fixed on him, the mixture of curiosity and newfound respect sharpening as she observed the measured way he adjusted his stance, each subtle shift conveying confidence, patience, and mastery without a word being spoken. The sunlight streaming through the high windows cast long, narrow beams across the marble floor, illuminating the faint glint of his tattoos and the smooth polish of the surface beneath them, creating a visual rhythm that echoed the silent cadence of his movements. Around them, the employees and interns had fallen into a hushed stillness, sensing that the moment unfolding was no ordinary demonstration, that something deeper, almost intangible, was being conveyed through the quiet authority of a man who had walked a disciplined path far beyond the walls of the office. Wes lifted the mop slightly, pivoting with careful control, his posture straight yet relaxed, the air of restraint and self-possession radiating outward in subtle waves, compelling attention without demanding it. Lauren's lips pressed together, a faint inhale betraying the recognition that the presence she had underestimated carried a weight that authority alone could not replicate, and the slight narrowing of her eyes reflected both contemplation and acknowledgement. The ambient sounds of the room, the distant hum of the ventilation system, the faint echo of footsteps from elsewhere in the building, the soft scrape of the mop on the polished floor, became a backdrop to the silent dialogue of presence and observation, each person attuned to the nuances of movement, posture, and gaze. Wes's gray eyes scanned the room slowly, capturing the attention of all who were watching while conveying experience, confidence, and steady awareness, the kind of awareness born from years of training, responsibility, and quiet reflection on choices and actions. The sunlight glimmered against his forearm tattoos, partially exposed beneath his sleeves, the intricate lines of ink telling stories of service, commitment, and honor, subtle yet unmistakable to anyone looking closely. Lauren's breathing had slowed, her posture slightly less rigid, a tacit acknowledgement forming as she internalized the quiet strength, resilience, and composure embodied by the man in front of her. The room's energy felt almost tangible, a mixture of anticipation, respect, and reflection, each observer aware that they were witnessing a rare demonstration of character expressed through stillness, deliberate motion, and silent confidence. The polished floor reflected the light, the subtle sheen of the mop handle, and the faint shadow of their figures, all composing a visual symphony of discipline, dignity, and the unspoken lesson that presence, patience, and integrity often speak louder than words or showmanship, leaving an impression that would linger far longer than the brief span of this afternoon. Wes Dalton took a final, measured step back from the center of the mat, lowering the mop to its resting position with a gentle click against the polished floor, and for the first time the room seemed to exhale collectively, the tension dissolving into a quiet, reflective energy. Lauren Kingsley remained still, her sharp gaze softened by a new recognition, the initial assumption of superiority replaced by a silent acknowledgement of his experience, discipline, and quiet authority. The sunlight streaming through the atrium's windows painted long, narrow lines across the marble, highlighting the subtle contours of his form and the understated presence he had maintained throughout the demonstration. Around them, the employees and interns shifted imperceptibly, each caught in the moment of realization that what they had witnessed was not a display of spectacle but a lesson in integrity, patience, and composed strength. Wes's gray eyes met Lauren's once more, steady and unflinching, conveying a depth of character shaped by years of dedication, quiet service, and the careful balance of personal responsibility with care for others, his presence radiating dignity that required no words to assert itself. The tattoos on his forearms, partially revealed by the rolled sleeves, seemed to absorb the light, each line of ink a silent testament to missions, commitments, and values upheld without expectation of recognition. Lauren's lips curved in the faintest expression of understanding, a subtle acknowledgement that the measure of a person was not found in title, position, or outward display, but in the way one carried oneself, treated others, and maintained composure when no one was watching. The soft hum of the air system, the distant footfalls from elsewhere in the building, and the polished reflections of marble all served as a gentle backdrop to the profound simplicity of the lesson unfolding in the atrium. Wes adjusted his shoulders slightly, a minimal motion that nonetheless spoke volumes, his posture relaxed yet firm, exuding the quiet confidence of someone who had mastered both himself and the space around him. Lauren took a slow breath, her body easing from the rigidity of anticipation, a subtle shift that mirrored the collective understanding settling over the room. The mop, the tattoos, the controlled movements, and the stillness combined into a silent narrative that communicated more effectively than words ever could, leaving an impression of patience, respect, and measured authority that lingered long after the demonstration concluded. Observers felt the weight of the moment, the unspoken lesson of integrity and quiet power resonating in their consciousness as Wes Dalton stepped fully aside, returning to the background of the room with the calm assurance of a man whose strength was defined not by noise, attention, or validation, but by presence, composure, and unwavering dignity, leaving the atrium transformed not by spectacle but by the subtle, undeniable power of character.